We used to have this crazy beast living in our house. He was covered in white fur. He would jump all over the walls, jump on you. He would sometimes take poops right outside the door. It's like sometimes I felt like he purposely did that so he could watch us step in his poop when we walked out the door. This dog was nuts. He was the family dog. His name was Patrick. He always added anxiety to every room when he would enter it. If you had a conversation with Allie, she would totally disagree with you. I'm sure of that. But I'm the one making this video, so let's just assume Patrick's crazy. One thing Patrick loved to do was to puke everywhere. He never puked on hard surfaces so you could easily clean it up. It was always on carpet, so it would leave a stain. So every time you looked at that stain, you would remember, hey, it was Patrick that did that. But after Patrick would puke, he would go and annoy somebody or wreak havoc around the neighborhood. He always returned back to his vomit. He always did it. And he would gobble it up and eat it. And you'd say, that's gross. Why would he return back to his vomit? In Proverbs, it tells us that, like a dog returns to his vomit, a fool repeats his folly. We do the same thing. As we come to a close on this series of Judges, we've looked at this cycle of sin. Like we started our series out with dissecting that, and we're going to end with looking at that once more. We saw that the Israelites were following God, and they saw that the idols around them from the false gods and the land that God gave them were more appealing and more appetizing than following the Lord himself. And they started to follow them. And God got angry and he sold them into slavery and allowed the enemy to oppress them to a point to where they cried out for mercy. They asked for help. And when God was always faithful, he always raised up a judge to rescue the Israelites from the oppression of their enemy and to point them back to following God. And then now here they are following the Lord, and we have this cycle, and we've seen it over and over and over again. Well, we find ourselves all the time in this cycle. We're following the Lord, things are going great, but then all of a sudden, the slippery slope happens. We come down, we see a pile of our old vomit, and we're like, wow, that looks real good. I think I need to eat that. I need to return back to it. And we come back down, and before we know it, we're just like that dog returning to our vomit and eating it. We find ourselves in this over and over again. So how do we break this cycle? The only way to break the cycle is by looking at the author and perfecter of our faith, and that's Jesus Christ. In Hebrews, it tells us, in Hebrews 11, or Hebrews 12, it says, therefore, since we have been surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that's been set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. The only way to truly break ourselves out of this sin cycle is to fix our eyes upon Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And we need to hang there, we need to sit there, and we need to dwell there instead of looking at the things that are so appealing to us in the world, like our vomit, and returning back to them. We need to hang there by getting in our Bible, by praying, by getting accountability, by serving, all of the things that we're constantly telling you guys this. I don't know if you're still currently in a cycle of sin. We can talk about it in our groups tonight. And we're really going to talk about how do we stay focused on following the Lord all the time? Like, what are the things that are distracting us from that happening? The other thing that we learned something really strongly about are these judges and these flawed people that God raised up and used in a mighty way to deliver the Israelites and point them back to God. We could see that these guys were flawed all over the place. They all had problems. They were all messed up. And I mean, for me, as I dug through the series, I looked at these guys and I'm thinking like, man, these guys are crazy. But then I found myself being convicted like of passing that judgment. Because in Hebrews 11, we have the Hall of Faith. And all these guys are listed in the Hall of Faith. They were found to be righteous with God because they were faithful enough. And God used them. And he wants to use you too. Do you feel like you can be used, or do you feel like he is using you? What was your favorite part of this series? Because all of these guys that were written down, all this stuff with the Israelites, it was written down for our instruction. It says in 1 Corinthians 10, it says, now these things happened to them as an example, and they were written down for our instruction. Instruction. So we can learn from them, and we can apply them to our lives. How have you applied? What have you learned from this series? and have you applied it to your life? It goes on to say, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. I want you to look at the questions. I want you to get real as always, and I can't wait to hear how it goes.